beyond what we're going through now. So the topic for today is community radio sustainability during and beyond COVID-19. And to our speakers, I'd really urge you and request you today to be as elaborate in terms of examples is where we're going to learn a lot. Without wasting much time, I'm going to ask our first guest, Bridget Jalov, who is from Denmark. She is a CMFE president and founding director of Empower House in Denmark. She is going to talk to us today about program sustainability, relevance, and addressing issues of concern and staff capacity in terms of content production within community radio stations. Bridget, I hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Boosie. Also, a word of gratefulness from my side that to be involved in this important session with friends and colleagues from around the globe. There's always so much to learn. It's nice to meet you, Boosie, for the first time. It's not going to be the last. I very much want to hear more. As for myself, I'm based in Denmark, as Boosie was saying. I have worked with community radio in many countries. I started in my own with a women's community radio, and I've, among others, worked for 6 years in Mozambique. I have worked on and off for 4 or 5 years in Zimbabwe. I've worked on and off for 4 years in Tanzania. I've worked a little bit in India, some in the Philippines, and so on. So I've been a little bit around. What I'm saying will be based on that. I think that sustainability of community radio, as it's phrased here, or community media, because a radio rarely is just a radio these days. It also works on the social media and in other ways. Sustainability of community media is the core. It is what everything else, in my mind, relates to. The very significant person that those of us who were lucky to work with him also got an opportunity to call our friend from Bush Radio, Zain Ibrahim. I was just almost forgetting his name. I haven't seen him for so long. He said that with community radio, the community is 90% and 10% is radio. And I couldn't have said it better myself. I think that I believe very firmly in his view. Community media, of course, I don't need to tell anyone here, but maybe some of the listeners, some of the participants. You can say that where you have the public media, you have commercial media, then community media make up the third tier of the media landscape. And it is in that way one of the 3 tiers of the media landscape in the countries that are lucky to also have Mozambique, where I lived for 6 years. Community media actually came to be synonymous with civil society. There were at the time, right after the war in Mozambique, not many civil society organizations. And when communities came together to start a community radio, that became the civil society activity. It became the voice of the people. And that just stresses what the way Zain Ibrahim framed community media. In my mind, there are 3 core aspects of sustainability when you look at community radio, and then there's a fourth one. The fourth one that we can quickly get over with, that is the enabling environment. Without an enabling environment, you know that painfully well in Zimbabwe, where there's still very little space, if any, for real community radio, community voices, legal have the three other areas. You have the financial sustainability, which to many of us, when we don't think well, when we just think sustainability, we think money, and we think financial sustainability. But actually in community radio, the way I have come to learn them, working with community media for more than 30 years, you can see how old I am. You can see that in many communities, actually it is the social sustainability and the organizational sustainability that will help you achieve financial sustainability. It is when the community is well organized and is part of the community media environment that you are also able to have the framework and the support that can help you become financially sustainable in an environment where the state may not offer you funding. And it is when you have systems in place. It doesn't have to be very bureaucratic, can be very flat structure, but where it's very clear what responsibility everyone has, and that the community doesn't get this feeling, oh, these guys in the radio, they sift off all the money that is meant for our radio. So you have to have a clear and well-functioning organizational structure. So with community sustainability, with well-organized community engagement, which to me is at the core, that is what all the research that I have undertaken and that I've read from other people. Without community engagement, it can be very difficult for a small community radio or medium to become sustainable, and then the organizational and the financial. So the first question I was given is, what is sustainability? And it's important for ensuring the success of a community radio. I will say that it is that you are part of the community, and maybe not just the languages, but the dialect of the language that we use in our community, that you use the metaphors and the idioms, the stories that belong in our culture and that can help us understand different things. And it is when we are given a voice, not just from time to time being interviewed, but actually when we can engage in groups of volunteers and being community broadcasters. That ownership, that will also support both the organizational trust and credibility and the financial sustainability in the long run, in my experience and view. Do you want to come in, Busi, or should I just move on?
Yes, no, I think you've touched on a number of things. Maybe just to direct your follow-up discussion on how the community can the sustainability. You talked about how when the community is sustainable, it also supports the organizational sustainability and therefore the community media itself. So how do you get the community involved in aspects of sustainability?
Well, that's a very good question. That's always a good way to start, isn't it? No. How do you get the community engaged? That depends. Always, I would say that if you start a community initiative, it is important to do that through community mobilization activities around and in engaging people, identifying what are the programmatic areas you want to cover, what are the things in your community and in your culture that you want to celebrate in programs, what is it that you want to deal with and tackle that is problematic, and that people get engaged around in editorial groups to actually do the programming about their own lives. And it is your own peers, when it is your neighbor, your daughter, the school teacher, the nurse who speaks on the radio, the listeners will actually follow that lead. And you asked the Busi for concrete examples, and I can say from the time when I lived in Mozambique, and one of the radios we worked with was in an area where every year you had flooding. That meant every year you had cholera, and usually 3,000-4,000 people got ill and 300-400 died. This had happened every year, UNICEF had worked hard. The Ministry of Health had worked hard. Red Cross volunteers had worked hard to try to change attitudes and ways of working and putting chlorine in the water and all of that. But people just didn't dare to trust all these authorities or authoritative people because of the experience from the war. It was a post-war situation. It is probably poison. So when they started their own community radio, thing that the UNICEF and the ministry had said, putting chlorine in the water, boiling the water, not eating the red dirt, which was the traditional idea that would help against diarrhea. Then actually 5 years in a row, nobody died from cholera. It's just one. I have many cases like this from Laos, from India. So when you say, how do you engage people? Well, this is actually the reason why you should engage people. But if you have a radio station where you do not have the community engaged, you can do so many different things. Mobilization activities are quite known in most countries, and creating a space where it is acceptable and understood that you are the ones we want to listen to. You are the ones with the stories. You are the ones who can address and who need to help and to find ways towards solutions to some of the challenges that we have. ZACRAS is live, I know, and also now I'm just seeing Baslu here, who works very much to strengthen women and youth in Bangladesh. You have to remember to engage women consciously from the very beginning. If you don't do that, it can be very hard. I mean, it's always the young boys who run to the radio first when it comes. And you have to be very cautious and systematic to engage women from the beginning, and that includes also other traditionally marginalized groups.
So I was gonna ask, thank you very much. I was gonna ask finally, you talked about using local voices, using local language and idioms and cultural aspects, infusing that in your programming.
Right.
What happens if you don't have, for example, a local expert to speak on an issue using local language? How do you make the listeners or your audiences in whatever media platform you're using feel a part of the discussion and accept the views from an outsider?
And the trust of the community towards the station. It will not be a problem in any way. You will introduce a person. You will explain why you had to find somebody from the capital city speaking a different language. You will translate. There are many ways. So there's a very nice resource. I will put it in the chat. Very nice resource on how you can work with different languages at the same time in community radios. And you will then, when that person with a different language and different experience and background has spoken, you will talk it through again. You may have a group of people in the studio who can debate it using local examples, the local language. You can open the telephone. People can call in and say, I really didn't understand that, or this is not so in Tanzania, or this is not so in Denmark. This isn't relevant at all. And then you can get a talk like that. You can mediate between languages and experiences. It takes a little bit of experience, but it's really not difficult. It's being done every day in many places. I don't hear you, Busi. I don't hear you, Busi. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'd muted myself there and not noticed. Maybe we could move on to one of our other speakers, Mr. Basler Rahman. Are you there?
Yes.
Welcome, Mr. Rahman.
You hear me?
Yes. Rahman is the Chief Executive Officer of Bangladesh NGOs Network for Radio and Communication, BNNRC, since the year 2000. He is serving as a member of Community Radio Monitoring Committee of Ministry of Information, Government of the People's Republic of Bangladesh. That is. He'll be talking to us about working and collaborating with duty bearers to tap on government programs and projects, as well as policy dialogue and duty bearers. budget there did talk about the need for a conducive environment and how we sustain community media through what policies are there, through what government puts in place for us. Maybe Raman, you could shed light on us on the importance of policy formulation and its impact on the sustainability and existence of community media, especially around COVID issues.
Yeah, Madam Bushi, and also my other distinguished speaker, and also distinguished participant from all over the world. A very good afternoon from Bangladesh. It's a great pleasure for me to be here to share something regarding policy advocacy on community radio and community media in Bangladesh and as well as beyond, like Asia Pacific, like this. So I have some PowerPoint. So Madam Bushi, can I start my PowerPoint presentation?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you can share your screen if
okay.
you need to.
Okay, please, can you allow me to open up the screen? Okay. Okay, now working.
All right.
Okay, Madam Bushi, can now you see everything?
Let me check because I was now reading the chat messages.
Okay, okay, thank you. So, okay, let me start first. Yeah, let me start first some strong thing. We have some strong thing as a policy advocate. Community radio, community media in Bangladesh from 2000. So you already mentioned. So 20 years we are running. So as a policy advocate, by this time we achieved something through the policy dialogue with the government in Bangladesh as well as community radio practitioners. So first one is created scope for the poor and marginalized community to raise their own voice. Already my mentor Jalab already mentioned the voices for the voiceless. So basically this is the very strong point for the community media side now in Bangladesh and as well as South Asia. Scope widened for poverty reduction and sustainable development because the right to raise voices of the community and access to knowledge and information. So through the community radio, through the community media, we have already harmonized with our agenda for poverty reduction and as well as sustainable development in line with the raising voices. Lots of disadvantaged community, the rural community raising their voices through community radio and as well as access to information and knowledge. It is a very, very important. And my mentor Zalov already published one book called Sustainability of the Community Radio. So she very much emphasized the access to knowledge and information through the community radio is very, very important. Third one is scope open for access of dialogue between locally elected bodies, national government, business community, as well as NGOs. So for promoting better governance, it's a very good example for the community media sector. I think this is not only South Asia factor, it's a cross Africa, Latin America, as well as Asia Pacifica experience like this. Next one is direct linkage established between community and the main area also, like main sector reflected to SDG and also national plan. And through the community radio, basically it's our great achievement from the community radio side. We established very good relations with the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goal, and as well as governmental plan. And next one is scope created for social debate. It's a very, very important thing, and inclusion and preservation of the cultural diversity, because cultural diversity nowadays is a very important thing. And I think across Africa, Latin America, and as well as Asia Pacifica also playing a very good role for promoting cultural diversity through community radio. And as well as, you know, every day one language we lost according to UNESCO declaration. So we lost one language every day. So the community radio really playing a very good role in line with the inclusion, marginal issue. Community radio is now able to play a more active role in disaster risk reduction like COVID-19 due to the establishment of effective linkage between government and also locality. So I think already European experience shared by Zalov regarding the role of community radio during the COVID-19, really it is a very important thing.
Thank you, Raman.
So
I think I'll cut you off there.
Okay.
I need to cut you off there because I want to bring in Rakmin Wejeman. He is an engineer graduate from the University of Sri Lanka and has worked with the Sri Lankan Broadcasting Corporation, and would like to talk him to talk to us around the issues of technical sustainability. We know that a lot of work during COVID has had to go onto online platforms, and a lot of offline. What would you say are the sustainability issues when it comes to technical issues, especially when you're working with community members that may not have the skills around online, working online platforms? What would your experience in that area be?
Bushi, I have a presentation. Can I upload it? Can I show it?
I would love maybe our presentations to be shared on the chat room. Maybe if you can pick from it some of the issues that we're going to be talking about so that it's more interactive. Once we have a presentation, then it means we have to ask questions from the presentation. But I would like us to all talk around the sustainability issue. So you can pick from your presentation to cover some of the questions that I'll throw in at you. You can go ahead.
Yeah. So basically, technical sustainability, to my mind, means that we need to have, as they are designed to perform for a longer period, as long as possible. And what has happened is sometimes that the equipment do not receive the necessary care. And what I was trying to say was that all this equipment do have some inherent problems, and they age like we do. There's a infant period for the equipment, and then there's a period that has basically fairly stable period, and then there's an aging period. So that's the period that we are, the three periods that we have to deal with. And as far as the equipment are concerned, and especially in community radio stations when where they're operating in fairly, let's say, disadvantaged, it can be hot, and it can be, the power systems may not be too stable. So these things have to be looked after. And also, there has to be periodic inspections of the equipment. For example, especially in the case of transmitters, where the cables and the antenna and the transmitter itself has to be checked as to how it's performing. We had a problem with one of my customers when he called me one night and he said that his transmitter it starts to power up and then it resets itself and then starts to power up again and so on. It wouldn't reach its recommended power. So what we did was we got some readings of the machine from the customer, and we contacted the manufacturer and we discussed what the problem could have been. And they wanted some pictures of the power supply board. And true enough, it was full of dust. And the dust created this problem. And so we told our customer he cleaned it with a pressure, high pressure compressed air, and the problem was solved. So what I'm trying to say is that we need to have these equipment operating in reasonably sterile conditions, and it has to be periodically clean and so on. And there has to be also some designated staff who will periodically check this equipment and may even keep records of such things. So sustainability is that way, is the one, and that's how most even broadcasting stations maintain the equipment. For example, in where we work, you have to leave your shoes behind and walk barefoot and have slippers that are inside, so that we don't bring in dust inside, and equipment are in air-conditioned environment. Even if that's not the case, it's necessary that it should be in a clean environment where dust is presence of dust is minimized. I can go through
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Rahman. Maybe at this time, I'd like to bring in Zukiswa. Zukiswa is the Chief Executive Officer of the Media Development and Diversity Agency of South Africa, which is a statutory development agency for promoting and ensuring media development and diversity. So you are at the crossroads of policy making and sustainability of communities in South Africa. Can you give us how that has been and how you've been media alive in this era, Zukiswa?
Oh, certainly, Busi. Thank you very much for having us, ZACRAS. Good morning and evening to my fellow panelists. I know that I think in Australia it's in the evening now, so it's good morning, it's evening, and it's good day to some of us. My name is Zukiswa from South Africa Media Development and Diversity Agency. I think it is befitting for me to give a bit of a context to South African media, particularly the role and the history of the community media. And I think, as Bijet has said, that a lot of activism by civil society went into it. It is the same with South Africa that we saw pre-1994, which was our democratic year, or our first elections as people of South Africa that were previously prohibited from voting, that the media in South Africa came from a very concentrated, centralized, highly monopolized era, and controlled everything that was to be said to the people of South Africa. And I think it is befitting for me to mention that South Africa had been exposed because of the apartheid, and because we were fighting the apartheid in the 60s already. Some of you in this panel would know about Radio Freedom, which was owned by the current ruling party, the ANC. So the South Africans were exposed to community media even at the time, even though it was in a way that was defiant to the government of the day, which is the apartheid government. So we then emerged in 1994 from that history, and as a result of all the activism by students, by the civil society, government then saw it fit to establish the Media Development and Diversity Agency through an act of parliament in 2002. And it was purely for the reasons that I think Bijet mentions, that the core to sustainability is the conducive environment. So the MDDA, as we call it, sure that there is that conducive environment for media development, for media transformation, for plurality of voices, but more so to ensure that South Africans have access to information, which is a right enshrined in our constitution, that there's media freedoms, which is also enshrined in our constitution, but more so to ensure that the previously disadvantaged groups of South Africa have got access to information, but also they manage, own and control media, because I think we thought that as government that is the only way we would ensure that those marginalized groups actually have access to information. So how is the MDDA funded? The MDDA, when it was established, colleagues, it was established in partnership, because this is very important, because it forms part of the financial sustainability of the community media sector, particularly the community radio stations and the community televisions. We've got a lot of community and small commercial print as well. How we are funded is that we partnership between government. So government was always going to support and maintain the the community media sector, particularly community radio stations, the print as well. But also that government went to the private sector. It went to the commercial print. It went to the commercial broadcasters and said, can we partner in ensuring that we've got this sector and it's structured and it is supported so that it can be well developed. And so that is how we are funded. That government gives us a grant, but also commercial broadcasters through a law pay something called universal access levy, and that comes to us, and that is the major part of the funding. And who we support as the MDDA? The MDDA supports all the non-profit organizations, Section 21 non-profit, the NGOs, community-based organizations that are not commercial. So you must not be a commercial broadcaster in order for you to come to us. But one of the major things that we need when you come, so unlike you, Zimbabwe, we've got a regulator called ICASA. It is an independent regulator which then licenses community broadcasting. And as Bijet said, we are also a third tier of the media. So it's public broadcasting, it's commercial, and then it's us. But we've got currently, at the moment in South Africa, we've got more than 264 licensed community radio stations. We've got 5 licensed community televisions. And the numbers fluctuate. And the numbers fluctuate for many reasons, that the community radio stations, whose audience is about 8 million per month, that it reaches. The community radio stations were at some point 280, but for various reasons, which are very also critical to the sustainability of the sector and the survival of the sector, the issue of compliance with the laws, compliance with the broadcast license conditions. The broadcast license conditions will tell us that you must broadcast, or you would. So you would say, I will broadcast in isiXhosa, 60% and 20 in Afrikaans and 20 in English and so forth. But what we pride ourselves with at the MDDA is ensuring that we preserve and we promote the use of indigenous languages. As a result of the 160 community radio stations that we have supported to date, and the MDDA is about 18 years old now, all of them are broadcasting in all the 11 official languages of South Africa. It's very important to us because we are to preserve and we are to promote the use of dialect, the use of, and that is the reason why we say community radio stations or community media is for the community, by the community. They are embedded in the communities in which they live. In fact, they are highly reliant on voluntarism. So you find in a station that if they've got 50 people working in the station, employees, you'd find that about 30 of those people are volunteers. And what we also entrenched aim, and the regulators' mandate is to ensure that we've got a board, the board that is representative of the communities, and it is representatives of the languages, and also that the communities do drive the content, because it must be localized content. It must be about the needs and aspirations of those communities. So it is very important for the community radio stations or the community media to be embedded and entrenched in the communities where they live, so that we actually then diversify and transform the airwaves in that way. One of my questions, one of the questions that I have is, in what way has the MDDA been supporting the development of the community radio sector in South Africa? Obviously, once you've got your broadcast license and you're compliant with your SARS, your tax laws and so forth, you would come to us and say, I'm a brand new radio station, I'm looking for funding. The MDDA, therefore, to provide what we call startup funding or seed funding. And later on, we will then, that is the reason why of the 264, we've just been able to maintain or to support 160, because you come back because of the lack of sustainability of the sector. We found ourselves funding the same institutions over and over again. But what are the things that we support the community radio stations with? Look, the MDDA is responsible for ensuring that there's this conducive environment, and it supports not only community broadcasting, but also community print. But because we're talking about community broadcasting today, I will stay in that. In terms of the package of what are the items that we support or we provide to the community radio stations or community televisions, it is the broadcast equipment, because without it, you will not be on air. And because once you want to be on air, you need a signal distributor, or sometimes they are self-providing. We will purchase a mast, or we will support you. There's an organization in South Africa called Centec, which is responsible. In fact, it is monopoly for signal distribution in South Africa. So most of our beneficiaries actually transmit through Centec. We also assist them with paying their signal transmission costs. We pay for broadcast equipment, we pay for operational costs, we pay for content generation, which includes salaries, stipends. Because of high voluntarism in these entities, we pay for maintenance costs, we pay for OBE, the outside broadcast devices, we pay for training, we pay for research. So the MDDA not only supports the sector in terms of financials only, it also supports it in terms of research. It also supports more so in terms of training, interventions, because over time, because again, we are reliant on volunteers, we've found of this high turnover, then the training must be vigorous and it must be continuous and it must be there all the time, so that we've got new youth coming in and being trained. Once they're comfortable, we lose them to the public broadcaster, which we're happy about, and we lose them to the commercial broadcasting, which we're also happy about. So there's continuous training in the sector. So I think those are the things that are for us a package of what we provide to the institution. So what we also do as the organization is we're very reliant on partnerships. So we go and meet other entities that have got similar mandates of supporting, whether it's through training, but the NPOs or non-governmental or non-profit organizations as we do. And we do then draw some resources from them. We had, I think a week ago, we had in South Africa, the first sustainability consultative conference on sustainability. And that was for us to then develop terms of reference for a sustainability model for the community media sector. We're going to learn on the way, and that is why I'm here today. It's because we would like to learn from other institutions, other countries that have gone through that route and have got some kind of sustainability in their sector.
Okay, so thank you so much for because you are bringing in so much knowledge and example, and I think a lot of support for South African community media that a number of African countries may not have. For example, in Zimbabwe, we still have government officials that question what the definition of community is. And when you talk about the need for the use of indigenous languages and content being driven by the impact and experiences of individuals in a community, for me, that is mind-blowing, and that is something we want to tap into. But I'd like also to bring in Prosper Kugize from Tanzania. He is the Assistant Director of Mpande Radio FM in Southwest Tanzania. Is also a journalist specializing in the preparation and dissemination of community content. Now, Prosper, you've heard from Zukiswa, you've heard from Bridget and the other panelists. I am thinking around the fact that not all community media have the support of their government and systems like the South African system, for example. How can community media tap into their networks? In Zimbabwe, I noticed that with the help of organizations such as ZACRAS and the bringing in of community media together to form this collective of strong media hubs, it has helped a lot to kickstart them and help them share ideas and content and learn from each other. Can you tell us, Prosper, on the importance of networking to sustainability of community media?
Thank you very much, Busi. Thank you for the past speakers. It's true, and I congratulate here also about Zimbabwe. They have very nice, good model which helps community media to grow, but also to serve the community, which is quite different to Tanzania perspective. In Tanzania, we rely only on international organizations such as UNESCO, who is now supporting the network, supporting individual radio stations to make sure that they grow up, but also they save the rural community. In Tanzania, there is no governmental system which used to save or to support sustainability of the community radio. Hence, the government is there waiting for the taxes, fees, whatever. And that caused most of the community radio fail to operate. Bridget has a lot of experience of working with us in Tanzania, where the community radio rely only on the little income generated from their members' contribution, but also small adverts, because in our country, the regulations don't allow community radio to generate more income, while the broadcasting radius or coverage is limited. And we are also having interference from the mainstream media, where the mainstream media, because they have money, for instance, the National Broadcasting Corporation, they have money, they use our taxes, so they can expand everywhere. So they can expand also in our area where we are operating, and then interfere the business operation, the source of income for our radio station. So in this context, by having a community radio network is where our voice is being heard, but also is the place where we do advocacy, but also agree with us to amend their regulations. Unfortunately, they still pose new regulations, which is very draconian. Like in past July, they established the online content regulations. They did also 2 weeks ago, they did another regulations telling all radio stations in Tanzania that they're not allowed to rebroadcast international media content, such as BBC, Radio France International, Voice of America, Deutsche Welle. So all community radio were using the rebroadcasting style as a mechanism to gather more audience, so that the huge number of audience can also attract clients or investors to work with us. But nowadays you have to go and request for permission from the Tanzania Communication Regulatory Authority, which we are always campaigning for reduce of draconian regulations on media, but every day the government is establishing new one, which is challenging. But what I can say, there is no way the community radio or community media can grow without being within the network. So by having our network, which in Tanzania called Tanzania Development Information Organization, as an umbrella for community radio network, we are working together to have one voice, but also to help the community radio, those who are from interior, in the rural, almost 2,000 to 3,000 kilometers from the capital, to access the market opportunity from the capital like Dar es Salaam or Dodoma. But also we help the community radio to learn from others on how they tackle their issues. Network also help as a platform where we can connect one method of making radio growth to another. but also by support from UNESCO and under jar of as a consultants. Last year and this year, we managed to support community radio to come up with their strategic plan, which helps them on how to organize themselves, how to engage community, how to utilize the market spaces that they have, but also how to establish or how to produce the best program. Because as we know, community radio income depends on the our market depends on the following. First, it's quality of equipment that they have. In this aspect of the community radio, they use unreliable tools. As I said before, it's different from South Africa, where Zukiswa said that they have organizations that can help equipment, the modern equipment to the community radio. Here in Tanzania, there is an organization out of UNESCO who is supporting equipment to the radio so that they can use the modern one. And second group of market is quality of the staff. As you know, the challenge that we are facing in Tanzania, as I said before, is the size of the market. We have been given only 50 to 80 square kilometers coverage area. So you can imagine, for instance, in my radio, where I'm working from, in Panda, southwestern Tanzania, nearby Congo and Burundi, if you cover only 50, it means you reach a few people, because most of the area is forest. There is the Katavi National Park within the region, within the district. So you will end up cover within the animals, you see, within the park. So we have been taking our opportunity as a network to tell the government, to tell the regulator that we need more square kilometers coverage so that we can reach the people. And second, as I said, the quality of our staff is another issue. Most of the radio station income is really not reliable to support the radio to run itself, because the income is little income, but also where the radio is located, it's not conducive for the investors who will really think to support community development. So we end up from listeners' clubs with interest to become journalists. We train them as a citizen journalism, citizen journalists, and then they became a very nice broadcaster, journalists or content producers. But it's very difficult to acquire those who has a higher level of knowledge or profession, because most of those who have degrees, masters, they don't want to go and work in the rural. So to have quality journalists, it's one of the best things that is needed for the community radio to earn more. Another thing which is content. The content that being produced is one of the aspects that helps community radio, that they produce the community needed content, the content that people need to hear, need to listen. So that is very nice for us. We appreciate it, and then we became, and we media. Another of the aspect of for market is number of listeners, then coverage area. As I said before, we need to expand coverage area. Regulations should allow us to expand at least to 100 square kilometers or 150 square kilometers, so that we can reach so many people. And also the number of listeners will attract clients to come and invest within our radio. And the third,
thanks, Prosper. Can I cut you off there? I'd like to bring in Bridget there, because you talk a lot about the control of government regulation, and the limited coverage. And I wanted to find out from your experience, Bridget, how do we overcome or how does that impact the participation of the community in content production? For example, in Zimbabwe, we have a lot of laws that limit the extent to which journalists can go out into the community and gather information. And community members end up afraid to share their views them, frankly, because of these laws. So in a country like Tanzania, like Zimbabwe, where there's so much government involvement and regulation, how do you ensure that the content is still genuine, is still reflective of the community aspirations? I know it's a difficult one. You're muted, Bridget.
It could also be a very simple one to answer. And I think I will do that because there are so many others in the panel that other views can come in. Because you can say, when you think of the pure community medium that is owned, run, staffed, and has a community focus, then in principle, the reach of the station shouldn't be more than the sense of community. And you can say in a rural area where homesteads kilometers or 50 kilometers, it's where you usually would walk when somebody dies to tell the people that this person died and please come for the funeral. It's that kind of delineation or so of community. And actually I find, and I know this is very contested by some people and associations, but I find that that is actually a good limitation. It means that everyone who listens to the radio could in principle contribute, could in principle be part of an editorial group. It does limit the commercial reach naturally, because funding is very often dependent upon the number of listeners you have. But I think my experience is not just what I think, it's also what I think based on my experience. But the strongest, the little ones where the community feels this is our station. If there are problems, they provide broadcasters, they provide funding. In Laos, I worked with a small station over a 5-year period in the mountains. People were rice farmers. I could tell loads about that, how it opened up between different ethnic groups and so on. I'll not do that. But the people were rice farmers, and at the time of harvest, everyone contributed with a sack or two of rice. Instead of selling it at the cheap period, it was sold when the prices of rice were rising. So the station had a storage house next to the community radio station. So they could almost cover the expenses by that rice and by messages that the community were giving. I was just uploading the link to a small summary of a 2-week online debate that the organization Cameco, based in Germany, and my own organization managed with 200 participants in countries. We were working in 3 languages, and we were harvesting all of their financial sustainability opportunities from the very different ones. And some of the strongest and most well-functioning stations were 100% community funded. So there are different ways of looking at it. I've been discussing this many times with you, Prosper, and I know that many community radios may actually like to have maybe a 1,000 watt transmitter instead of a 250 or 200 watt transmitter, so you can reach more, you can get more commercial. But all those people living in the area around that, they will never be on the radio.